Good day, Minecraft fans. Collins here. Hope you're having a fantastic day, because we're in the Bevo Tech Pack Reborn with the Galacticraft MOD Mashup tutorial. For those of us with a base in Overworld that already supplies energy, storage, items, it's chunk loaded, we got sorting systems, and we don't want to reinvent the wheel on each new planet. So we're going to use some Mekanism, some EnderIO, some EnderStorage, and whatever other mods to produce oxygen and fuel in the Overworld, and we're just going to send it to the moon and all the other Galacticraft planets as we go off and explore. Because it's a Galacticraft tutorial, we got some Galacticraft gear here. We got a bunch of armor. We're going to use a jetpack. And then we got all of our Galacticraft stuff that we need to go to another planet. So you need this frequency module, otherwise you're not going to hear anything when you're on the moon. And we need an oxygen mask and oxygen gear, and we're going to need a couple of these fuel tanks. And don't forget a parachute. So, got all your gear on, you want a jetpack. You probably don't want like run speed and jump boost and stuff, because when you're in low gravity that stuff gets really weird. And we put all of our oxygen gear on. Don't forget a parachute, you won't be able to get back, and without this frequency module you won't be able to hear anything. So there's a couple things we can do to make this easier in our existing base. Let me show you what that is by starting off with some of the stuff we're going to use. So we're going to use 3 Galacticraft Oxygen Collectors and an Oxygen Compressor from Galacticraft. We're going to use an energy storage from Galacticraft. You can use the big cluster, you don't have to. There's a reason why we do that, and then some of the Galacticraft wire to go with that. And we're going to need a couple of these oxygen tanks. You saw us put some on. And then a refinery and a fuel loader. We're going to need some Mekanism Gas Tanks, and I'll show you how those work. And then we need a battery from Galacticraft. It's a filler thing. And then for EnderIO, we're going to use this Dimensional Transceiver, which is kind of like a Tesseract, but it's pretty cool. And it's new, and we're going to try it out. And then, of course, you need storage. We're going to use that fluid tank from EnderIO. And then, we need some energy and item and gas conduit and some fluid conduits. And then we only need a couple of filters. So there's some chargeable item filters and some basic item filters. And obviously, you're going to need your launch pad and your ship and stuff like that. And because we're using EnderStorage, we have the EnderChest and EnderPouch. And don't forget your good old Yeta wrench for EnderIO. It's BuildCraft compatible, so it does work on the Galacticraft machines too. And then we're going to use a staff at traveling. So here's a bunch of stuff we have set up. Let me show you first off. So in existing base, you got storage and stuff like that. So in this case, I've got an EnderChest that automatically refills with steak and torches whenever I need them. And we've set this up to connect to an EnderIO storage bank, capacitor bank. And there's something really easy you can do with this thing. You take your capacitor bank and you set a channel that matches your EnderChest. And this is pretty easy to do. The EnderChest is just in and out. And then the capacitor bank is in and out. But what we've done is anything that is not 100% full goes into the capacitor bank. Anything that is 100% gets sucked back out. So what happens with that is I've got a staff of traveling that has no charge in it, and I stick it in here, and it's going to disappear, show up in there, and it's going to fill up. And when it fills up, it's going to go back into this EnderChest. So anything that takes RF, you can use this type of setup to refill everything. And because it's an EnderChest, we can use an EnderPouch. And you can see this EnderPouch is not coated. If I shift right click on the EnderChest, it's coated. And now I can carry this thing around with me, and it's got all of this stuff in here. And anytime I got an item that is not fully charged, I stick it in here and it would disappear and recharge. And let me show you how this all works. So we got our jetpack, has a little bit of energy out of it. I got a bunch of different tools from Redstone Arsenal, takes flux, thermal expansion, battery takes flux. This Mekanism network reader takes flux. We can stick any of these things in here, and it's going to just pull them out of our thing, stick them in and charge them. When they get charged, they go back in the chest. So that works for everything there. Let me show you how these Mekanism gas tanks work out. So it's a gas tank. You place it on the ground, and you can wrench these, but most of the time when you wrench the Mekanism stuff, it faces towards you. So this little red dot is actually the output. And the other thing is these actually have an inventory. So if you put a tank at the end to the top of it, it's going to fill up the tank with whatever is in the tank that's on the ground. It's the same tank. It's whether you place it on the ground or carry it around as an inventory. And then if you put a tank in from the bottom, it's going to drain the contents of this tank into this tank. So we're going to use that here. We're going to have this tank on here in the overworld, which is this one right here. And then when we put stuff in from the top, it's going to fill up the tank. And then when we get to the moon and stuff, we're going to feed these full tanks into the bottom slot of one of these tanks, and it's going to refill our oxygen supply. It just works. It works faster than these Galacticraft machines do, because otherwise we're not going to have a big enough oxygen supply to get everything over. And then we got some of these machines set up. You can spin these around with the wrench. This red is usually output and green is usually input, and the square is energy. So we want to get all these so that the energy is facing the same way, and then we can just run energy cable. And with the Galacticraft machines, they get a little weird with other energy systems. You can put like different mods energy cables into these things, but they seem to work best with the Galacticraft energy cables, so we're just using those. So if we snake everything into here, we got a refinery refining some oil, we got into fuel, and the fuel's going into the tank, and this is all coming out of the battery, which is being fed from with EnderIO with power from our base. Pretend we got a big base over here, and then it goes off to all of our machines. So we're collecting oxygen. We are piping that oxygen out with EnderIO, so it's coming out of the oxygen collectors. These 3 mechanism tanks are for a big buffer of storage, because these things do work a little bit slow, but 3 of them's enough for you, and then you just have this big buffer. And then those go into this oxygen compressor, which is going to refill these heavy oxygen tanks. These are the ones we wear. And because we have this hooked up on this red channel, which is the same channel as we're using for our charging system, it tends to want to take batteries and stuff in here. So that's why we built one of these junk Galacticraft batteries and just stuck it in that slot there. But that keeps, like, you know, a leadstone capacitor or anything else from putting charge going back into this machine. It was easier to do it that way. So this is going to refill our oxygen tanks. And then the other thing we have is these fuel canisters. So when you land back in the overworld, the pair chest is going to have your rocket and stuff in here, and then it's going to have a little bit of fuel. You can stick an empty fuel canister in here and it will retrieve the leftover fuel. And that works better than a bucket, because a bucket holds exactly 1 bucket's worth of fuel, but you're going to have slightly less, so it wouldn't fill up a bucket, but it will fill up one of these fuel canisters. And it's a little bit of compressed tin and compressed steel, and then a tin canister and some glass. It's not too hard to make one of those. So you carry one of these empty canisters with you when you're on when you go to the moon. Your moon lander is going to look just like this. You can stick an empty canister in that to get some fuel back, and then these pair chests come back when you land back in the overworld, and we can use that too. So one of the things I like about the other wrench is you can spin this thing around. So there's our item transport. So we got items being fed into, this is the Dimensional Transceiver. It works kind of like a Tesseract, and then into the Oxygen Collector, and then into this Mechanism tank, and we're also going to feed some items into, this is the EnderIO tank. There's actually Conduit on the bottom, but I just got one on top to show you what it looks like. And then there's our recharging system, and then you can look at the, this is liquids, so we got oil coming from our base, we got fuel going in from our refinery into our loader. And this tank is for fuel, but we're only extracting fuel, because what this is we're going to take those partially filled tanks and we're going to stick them in here. And this is the EnderIO tank. It's got an interface. So if I do this, how does this work? Yeah. So it took the tank and drained it and put the fuel in here. So we don't want this thing to be filled up from our refinery, because we want it to take all the extra fuel that we get out of our ship and stuff. So it's going to hold that fuel, and because it's a shorter path from here to the fuel loader and to the dimensional transceiver, then that fuel is going to come out of there first before it gets used from the refinery. That way we use up all of our extra fuel. And if you're wondering where that fuel can went, we have a filter on this. So insert any can that's not empty, extract any empty can, and that's on this red channel with the charging stuff. So you take a partially filled can, you stick it in your ender chest or your ender pouch, and it drains the fuel back into your system so you can use it for other stuff, and then it gives you the empty can back. So we got the empty can there. We have a couple of these oxygen tanks. We want to stick some empty ones in here and get these to refill, and those will get shot up in here. And the filter on this, let's take a look. There's power. So we need to power our transceiver, we need to power our Galacticraft battery to get Galacticraft power converted over. And this is why we're using the Yetter wrench. So we sneak, which is shift by default, and scroll wheel, and it goes through the different things. So that was power we were looking at, and items. We already saw the gas stuff. So if we make sure this is on the green, that shows everything. And let's get back to the filters, because that's what we were looking at. So on our ender chest, we have this recharging channel that's red that goes into this recharging pouch with all of our RF stuff. Even our jetpack will get recharged in there. And where'd my jetpack go? Alrighty then. And this is why we're doing troubleshooting in the overworld. So I found the jetpack. The EnderIO fluid tank decided that some jetpacks take fuel, so it tried to stick everything in there. So I mentioned I got this conduit sitting up here on the top with some filters, because there's a conduit down there. It's underneath. It's the same. It's red in and out, and there's filters on it. But I put this on top so I could show you what it is without having to crawl underneath there. So because the tank thinks that some jetpacks take fuel, it tried to take the fuel in. So what I've done is I've blacklisted the jetpack, so the jetpack's not going in here. And then this has a lower priority than the recharging capacitor bank. So that's 5, that's 4, and then the EnderChest is 10. So now, hopefully, let's try this out. Come on, use a little bit of power. Use a little bit of power. It has a lot of power on this thing. Come on. Whee! Okay, 99. And like I said, this is why we're troubleshooting in the overworld. Okay, it stays in here. We good. We good. We all good. Okay, so filters. Red channel. This is again why we're troubleshooting. So we're gonna stick our canisters from the moon, from our lander, from our stuff. We're gonna stick partially filled fuel cans in here, and empty cans aren't going to get extracted, but any can that has any sort of fuel is going to get extracted, go into our tank, and put the extra fuel reserve in the little tank there. And then this red channel, the filter on that is insert any tank that's not full, extract full tanks. We stuck a couple of empty fuel tanks in there a second ago, and they went into our chest, so we know that that little bad boy is working. And then we have the gas tanks. And we're not putting them in the ender chest, we're putting them into the dimensional transceiver. That's why we have this yellow channel here, because the oxygen looks yellow. So no filter on this. What we have is a filter in here, and it's pretty much the same. Oh, there's no filter in this. That's right. We only need a filter at one end unless you're getting really complicated to set up. Since we're only using this color channel for one thing, the filter is actually on the dimensional transceiver, and it's right here. So we're going to send off full oxygen tanks, and we're going to bring back any oxygen tanks that's not full. So any oxygen tank that's not full is going to get sent into our transceiver, our Tesseract looking machine, and come back here to get refilled, and then get sent off to foreign planets. So we stuck one in there a second ago. It's already getting ready to be sent off. We can stick another one in, and it will fill up too. So it's filling up. So that's our oxygen supply, and we can actually test these things out. So what we can do is we can just set some stuff up in the overworld and make sure all this stuff works, because we we don't want to be on the moon and find out it doesn't work. So here's a fuel loader and one of our dimensional transceivers, and we just got to spin this around so power is on one side and the liquid is coming out the other side. So right now it's empty and there's no fuel in there. If we set this transceiver to receive power and receive fuel, boom, we're filling up with fuel or filling up with power. So we know that works. We can just shut this thing back off because that test is complete. So we're going to need a couple of these transceivers. They don't actually go through sealable walls, and we'll talk about sealable walls. But we're going to use one of these remotely for our fuel loader to refuel our ship to get back. And then what I've done is actually created a little sealed room here. So we're going to use these oxygen sealers, and the way they work is you just stick, you feed them power, you feed them an oxygen supply through your gas line, and if your room is completely enclosed, the oxygen will stay in there. You don't need the bubble distributor, and it uses a little bit less power and stuff like that. And so I've built a little test room in the overworld, because this thing actually does work in the overworld. It'll tell you whether the room is sealable or not. So we got some blocks here that we're testing out that can be sealed. So you can use a Tesseract and a TE battery and a EnderIO battery. You can put vanilla glass panes in the wall and vanilla glass. And then this is some Chisel Glass. So Chisel Mod has a bunch of different glass. So you can try some of the Chisel Glass and stuff like that, and you can test out which blocks are sealable and not. But we can test out this system too. So we've got this tank here, which is outputting into this line, and this is the mechanism tank. So in and out, no filters, in and out, no filters, and then we're going to filter on this thing. So we want to send empty, so we're going to send anything that's not full back. And the way you do that is you put a full tank in there and you blacklist it. So any tank that's not full. And then we want to receive full tanks. So whitelist, full tanks. That way if we get a partially filled canister or whatever, these mechanism tanks are actually smart enough to not, if it's while it's draining a tank, refilling itself from one of these tanks, it won't pull it out until it's completely empty. So if we feed this thing base power, we got some power flowing in here, and then we do the item transfer. Where you at? Oxygen tank, send and receive. Okay, so now our oxygen tank came out and went in there. In fact, we should be able to look. If we try to send a full tank, it should not go. Yeah, it won't even let us click it in there. So if we put an empty tank in there, it's going to disappear and get filled up. So it's filling up. Once this empties out, boom, it disappears, and we don't have enough tanks in there yet, so the other one's refilling. So this is our oxygen supply right now. It's being fed into this oxygen sealer, and you can see it says status sealed. So we can test all these different blocks out. There's some blocks that don't work. For instance, the dimensional transceiver, not sealable. So area too big is the only message you're going to get, that it's not sealed, but yeah, no dimensional transceivers. Even though you can use a TE Tesseract. So we can build a little room, seal it off. These open blocks, elevators are not sealable, so I got glass below that one, and there's a block below this one. So you can use the elevators on your moon base if you want to. You just have to put glass below them, and put another oxygen tank in there. So yeah, this is working, and that's going to give us an oxygen supply. And then we tested the fuel supply. So now we just have to look and see what kind of stuff we're going to take to the moon with us. So I've got everything in a TE strong box. So we want to make sure we bring, weapons and our pick that is ready, and we need some arrows and stuff. We're going to bring our Yeta wrench. We're going to bring our EnderPouch. When we have a staff of traveling from EnderIO we're going to bring, and we need to make sure we're carrying our empty fuel can to get our fuel back. And I've got 2 oxygen tanks that are filled up on me, and we want to make sure that there are 2 tanks in here. So there's one We can stick another one in there, and that one's going to go off and get filled up again. So supplies for the moon. You know, make sure you have armor and weapons and stuff. This is a heavy duty pick from Galacticraft. This is obsidian. Effective tool pickaxe, harvest level obsidian. Tooltip on the bottom right. We need to make sure that we have a pick that can mine obsidian. So the heavy duty pick can work. If not, you want to build a diamond pick or have one from a mod that is mining level obsidian, because we're going to the moon. We're going to get some moon stuff. So some of the supplies we need, make sure you bring, you know, cobblestone and wood and a crafting table and some chests and stuff so you can build things out of, you know, whatever you need to build. We got some chests for storage. We got some jack-o'-lanterns. Torches, normal torches are not going to work on the moon, so jack-o'-lanterns actually do work. And then we got some EnderIO glass we can use, whatever. Conduit facades to hide all of our EnderIO wiring. We're going to need 2 of these transceivers. You saw we used one for fuel and we used one for oxygen. So one outside the base for the fuel loader, one inside the base for the oxygen supply and power and stuff. We want to store some power in a capacitor bank. We're going to bring something to cook with. So we got an EnderIO smelter, which is just a furnace from EnderIO, and the painting machines for our facade so we can hide all of our wiring. Make sure you bring energy and item and gas and liquid conduits and stuff. And then we're going to bring some of our Galacticraft machines. So we got to have a fuel loader. If you don't bring a fuel loader and a supply of fuel, you're not going to be able to get back. And then we're going to use this oxygen bubble distributor when we first get on the moon. And then we're going to set up a permanent oxygen supply. So we have this airlock. So we want to build a base. We're going to make it we're going to seal it up, and then we're going to switch from using the bubble distributor to these oxygen sealers. And to do that, you have to have a sealed room. So you have to create airlocks out of these airlock frames, which you can make in the overworld. All the components to make this are available in the overworld, but then you need airlock controllers, and these are made with Meteoric Iron. So we need to go to the moon and get some of that stuff before we can build these. So each one of these is 6 compressed steel and a basic wafer. And we want to build 2 of them, so 12 compressed steel and 2 basic wafers. We're bringing those with us, and we're bringing our compressor to compress meteoric iron and a furnace to cook the iron. And then we're going to feed this machine from an energy storage cluster with some Galacticraft wire. So we can use the compressor and the oxygen sealer and all this stuff to create an airlock. And then the airlocks have a couple controls. So we're going to set one of them up. We're going to set a dual airlock system up, one for redstone control, and we do that with a EnderIO pressure plate, which is player activated, not mob activated. And then we got some EnderIO conduit, redstone conduit, and a couple of vanilla repeaters and a lamp, because we're going to create a circuit out of this, and the lamp will show us what the circuit looks like. And then we need to bring our oxygen supplies. So bring a bunch of filled tanks, bring one that's at least empty, because that may help with some filters. And some of the other stuff you might want to bring, like a solar panel and stuff. This is the Galacticraft one because it looks pretty cool, but the Mekanism ones work also. And then like a dolly to move our chests around. A magnum torch may help if you have those in your mod pack, so that we can keep mobs from spawning around our base. And then like a building guide from Open Blocks, which needs a redstone signal. And then we got all of our tools and stuff and our empty can. And we have an established base. That's what this whole thing is about. Like, I don't have a big base shown here, but this is based off the idea that you have a big base. So we're going to use these teleport pads from EnderIO, because once we get on the moon, we're just going to use another mod to teleport back and forth. So that's a teleport pad. You place them 3 by 3, 1 deep, and you get a teleport pad, and you have to set those up with these coordinate selectors. So we have a coordinate selector that we're going to bring, and we're going to set the coordinates for the moon, but we have to go there first, obviously. And we have one that we already clicked on the overworld, and it is going to, we're going to use that on the moon, and you can rename these from coordinate selector to whatever in a vanilla anvil. And then the teleport pads, you just power them with like a button. So here's a Project Red button. So this is everything we need, and we can just wrench this box and carry it with us. And then there's one more thing I want to mention before we launch off. So these torches don't work. There's Galacticraft torches. They are made out of glowstone, And it's just like it sounds, torch and a stick. So I've set up this system to feed me torches from Galacticraft. So we can pull some of these out, and our storage system is set up to recraft and fill up the glowstone torches in there again. So there's a bunch of stuff in there. I just want to mention real quick, we're using the Galacticraft machines. Mekanism has a way to create oxygen, but these machines they work fast enough and they use less power, so they're good to go. So the next thing we got to do is just launch. So in the spaceship, you press F to look at your fuel supply, and then you press space to launch. We got a quick view, spit up. Make sure you don't use the controls WASD to move the ship around, because that's going to change where you land. And then here we go. So the moon is in the overworld. So you double click, or you can either double click on the planet or double click overworld on the left. We zoom into the overworld, and if you have a space station, it's there, but we're going to pick the moon. It's probably a good idea to go to the moon first. And then you launch, and then what's going to happen is we're going to come down in the lander. It says press space. The best thing to do is just hold down space, otherwise you'll crash your lander, and boom, there. So this is the moon. If you stayed off the WASD controls on the ship and on the lander, you will land in the same place every time. If you maneuver the ship or the lander, you'll be in a different place. You can either shift or right click to come out of here. The wiki has a pre-flight checklist and a moon phase diagram. So if we picked it right, which we did, we got sunrise. And there's a base set up, but let me show you what happens when you first get to the moon. So you come out of your lander. I just right click to get out of it. You click in here. There's your launch pad and your rocket, and then like I said, you can stick an empty can in here and it's going to fill up with all the leftover fuel. You probably want to destroy these when you're done because they get a little buggy, and you don't want to land it on top of your house, because sometimes when they do get buggy, it'll the lander will have like rocket fuel coming out of the bottom, and it'll burn you if you land it on top of your house when you're inside your house. So there's a couple things we want to do here. We want to set up a base. We want to set up an oxygen supply, because right now we are using oxygen slowly, and we also need to find meteoric iron, which the longer you're in the world, the more this meteoric iron is here, and we got some already just sitting here. So what you do is you just mine this stuff, fallen meteor, and they have different colors depending on how recently they've fallen, and then you just got to catch this stuff. And did I also mention that you want to turn your jetpack off when you're on the lander and stuff, and then you leave footprints when you're on the moon. You can hop around. We need to grab some more meteoric iron, and there's some more over here. That one looks like it landed fairly recently. So a couple things when you first get to the moon. Meteoric iron is important, so if there's some nearby, grab it. Yeah, I got two. And then what you want to do is you want to pick up a spot to build a base and set some stuff up. So actually we can put our partially filled canister in there, and that will go back to our base. So this is where we landed. You probably want to launch near where you landed. That way you land back in the overworld at the same spot, and then pick a different area to set up a base. So I set up a base over there, but let me show you how to set this up in when you're first starting out. So the first thing we want is we want to set up our fuel loader and one of these transceivers. So the fuel loader, you can just pop it down on the ground, and then you can put a transceiver next to it. You can put it below like this. Hey. And then we just set it up with some power conduit and some fluid conduit. So we got power on that side and fluid on this side, and then we set this thing up to receive power and receive fuel, and that is refueling our loader. So now if we put our launch pad down, and then we put our rocket back on there, if we get inside and look at F, it's refueling. So I'm going to right click to get out of this. So now we are ready to go back to the overworld. Anytime we want to, we can just jump in that ship. So let's place another one of these down. and get some item and power and a couple of these gas tanks. Alright, so we want item conduits, and we got to place one of these things on top. And then face it away from, so this is going to go into our permanent oxygen supply. Let's go ahead and set this up to the same color that we had before just to make it consistent. And this is in and out. Again, we're not going to put filters on this, and then we'll just give it a little bit of priority. And then we'll do the same thing on this side. And we set up our receiver to receive some power and send and receive items. And we should have a tank in there filling up. Perfect. Alright. And then we can take power out of this thing. And we need our oxygen bubble distributor and a little bit of gas pipe. So you can place this thing down. It looks like I got the... Yeah. So there's power and items and power. Yeah, don't do anything with the items. Okay, so we're getting power coming in. Hey. Power, yeah. And then we just feed this line from our oxygen supply. Hopefully this works. Yeah. Alright. Oxygen in, not enough power. Oh, let's set the power channel. Receiving power. There we go. So now we got an oxygen bubble. And when we're in this oxygen bubble, we will be receiving oxygen from the system, and it's automatically going to refill these tanks up for us. It just took a second for the power to get in here. So now we're set up, and then we just build a structure. So I got a structure already built. So let me tear all this temporary stuff down, because this is just to show you how it's all set up, and then we'll take and set up show you how the permanent base is set up. Alright, hopefully you've been able to build a base. This is a pretty fancy structure. You might want to build a basic one first before you get too fancy with it. But we built a base and we enclosed it all in. We have our dimensional transceiver set up. It is receiving base power. It is sending and receiving oxygen, and we don't have a fuel thing in here, so no fuel. And then we have filled up a capacitor bank. In this case, we got some solar panels on the roof providing a little bit of extra power. We got lighting in here. We have our oxygen distributor, which is receiving oxygen. And then you can see down here is this yellow thing, and it's receiving tanks, and it looks just like that. In and out. You might want to give this a little bit of priority. And then there's that one underneath the ground underneath here that is pulling the oxygen tanks out. Again, you don't need filters on the conduit. We have a filter here. So send tanks that are not full and receive full tanks. And yeah, so if we have enough spare tanks in here, it's waiting to, okay, so it received a full tank. It is just waiting until this is depleted. Let's make sure that works. There we go. So yeah, so now it's going to keep feeding tanks. You don't want any of these set to dump. You want them set to idle. So we did the same thing. We output 1 into 3 for storage, and then these are outputting, and this is all snaked underground, and it goes over to our oxygen bubble distributor. And I got a couple of these set up and some facades and stuff like that, because now that we've got all this room set up, and I just got cobblestone blocking this off for now. So presumably you set up your base, you went out exploring, you got some of this meteoric iron. Let's set up a circuit, and oh, we got a glowstone lamp in there already. Okay, so we set up a circuit. This is where we're going to put our Airlock Sealer. And so what you need to do is you need to go underground here and place some stuff to set up a circuit. We want a kind of a stable circuit that is a pulse extender. So we're going to stick these plates on each side. and these are again player activated but not mob activated. It's dark pressure plates from EnderIO. There's a pressure plates mod that does the same thing. And then we go down underneath here, and you want to put down 2 repeaters facing in the same direction, one with no ticks, so 1 tick delay, and then one with full ticks, 4 tick delay. And then we set up some of this Redstone Conduit, and you're going to have to do this by hand, but what you want to do is you want to make sure that you wrench these so that they're pointing into the repeaters, and then also that you wrench these so that they're pointing into the block above them, which is where the block above. It gets a little tricky. You can probably jump to do this. There we go. Okay, so it's coming off of our pressure plates upstairs, and we want to do the same thing on this side. Pressure plate, connect, pressure plate, connect. Okay, and then we're going to connect on the other side of these repeaters, and then we're going to feed that over to, in this case it's the lamp, but it's going to be our receiver when we get it. So what we want to do to make this circuit work is one color goes into the repeaters, and we need a different color going out of the repeaters, so we can just click this. Alright, so now we got green going out, and the green needs to go into here. So we'll make sure that this is in out, and then what should happen now, and you don't need a ladder because we can jump on the moon, is any pressure plate I step on, it lights up, and it should stay on for an extra second after we get off the pressure plate. So any 4 of these pressure plates is going to light that up, and we know that that works. So that circuit is all laid out, and then we need to create our airlock thing. So what you do is, once you break these meteors, you just need to cook those. That's our painting machine. So we can cook those up, and they will turn into ingots. And then we have power coming out of our battery going into an energy storage cluster and then straight into the compressor, and that's going to make it work better. And unlike the regular stuff you compress, it's only one meteoric iron needed to make a plate, so 2 of these should make us 2 plates. Okay, and then we just have to, I have a crafting table set up somewhere. And then we craft the airlock controller. So it was 2 meteoric irons, a basic wafer, and then a bunch of compressed steel, and then we have an airlock controller. So now that we have the airlock controller, we can bust this stuff out, because we just built that to block everything off, and then we can bust this lamp out. No, can't yet wrench you. Alright, and then the airlock controller goes in there. Let's get all our stuff back, and then you can click on this. We're going to open with redstone signal. So now the airlock is closed, and now it's open. So there's more meteoric iron. That makes our second airlock controller. And that's going to go in here. Right there. And we want this one to be player is within 2 meters. Okay, so one will automatically open when we get close to it, and the other one is only going to open with pressure plates. That just makes it easier to get things to work. Step on the pressure plate. Oh, now you decide to get all funky. We did something wrong. It's airlock controls. I put it one too far to the side. Okay, so it's actually right there. And right there. Alright, now all 4 pressure plates. Okay, so now we got all of our pressure plates hooked up. We can stuff extra stuff back in here. And then we want the oxygen sealers. So once you have a room that is sealed and you have airlock controls and you got it all fancy and whatever, we can replace this thing with the oxygen sealers. And I have some conduit laid out already, so one goes there and one replaces this, and you can't wrench these to lift them up, so you're going to have to break it with the thing. Too many blocks. And obviously you'll grab a whole bunch of moon turf and moon dirt and all that stuff. Oxygen bubble distributor, oxygen sealer. So we need one there, and two of them will do a 16 by 16 room. And we need to wrench these. Yeah. Okay, and then we'll just make sure, I like to do this, make sure that they're all set to inserts and extracts and inserts and extracts. It's mostly a graphical thing. So now, what should be saying, room sealed, and we're in here, and now when we take off our oxygen tanks, we are not going to suffocate while we're in this room. And then you can use your oxygen bubble distributor. You know, you can place it like close to the edge of your base or on the outside of your base somewhere, and in fact we could even hook it up next to our launch pad, and it will go. And then we have these oxygen tanks, so one of them is partially full. If we stick that in here, it should go off and get refilled, and that way we have a constant supply of full oxygen tanks. So now you can go out exploring, you can go caving, you can go run around and grab some more of this meteoric iron. You'll hear explosions on the moon. Every time you hear an explosion, meteoric iron meteor has landed. So you'll find the meteoric iron and you'll find a bunch of blocks and stuff. And we've set this up, our pad here. Let me go ahead and actually show you how that works. So if you want to land directly on the pad, what you got to do is, not kick up all this dirt. Give me those blocks back. So here's our pad. I've actually got power coming in on the bottom, so you do have to power this with RF. You put a block on the ground, and then your coordinate selector that doesn't have anything on it, you shift right click, and new coordinates are in this dimension. And then we just take an anvil, put that down somewhere, and we can call this the moon, so we remember where it is. And then we use this one for the overworld on here by just simply right clicking it, and now it is selected. And then the one for the moon we're taking back with us. So this thing has RF feeding into it, it has a charge, and we just push the button and we launch off. And then what you do is this one here, if it's not set, you take your moon one and you right click it on here, which I've already done, and now it's set up to teleport. It says dimension -28, that is the moon, and now this will take us back to the moon. And away we go. Of course, when you're on the moon, don't forget to plant yourself some crops, whether you need them or not. Because now that we've planted potatoes on the moon, we've officially colonized. So thanks everybody for watching. Thanks everybody who likes and subscribes. I'll catch you guys later.